Our future food systems have to incorporate new technology. Because our population is growing, we're going to be 9 to 10 billion people on this globe relatively soon. And there are projections that we need to produce 60% more food than we're producing today by 2050 and to support that population. So what I like to say is that we need to continue with our conventional farming and agriculture and supplement and add to it new technology like what we're doing with plant cell culture and cellular agriculture, because there's got to be multiple shots on goal to be able to feed our population. The alternative is malnutrition and starvation. To me, that's unacceptable.
Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Stephen Lang from California Cultured. In part 1, we explored how plant cell culture works and the bioprocessing fundamentals behind cultured cacao. Now we are tackling the hard questions. Can this actually scale? What's the economic reality? And how do we move cellular agriculture from laboratory curiosity to commercial production? Whether you're in biopharma considering a career pivot or simply curious about the future of sustainable food, this conversation will change how you think about biomanufacturing. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics at market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Now to touch on the taste part, because that's an important part for me as a Swiss. I must say I'm pretty critical when it comes to chocolate. So producing cacao that tastes well is quite a complex process because it's not just a plant. There's a complex fermentation process going on. How do you reproduce that in the lab to get as close as possible to the natural cacao?
That is a really important question. And I'd like to set the stage by basically giving a synopsis of how chocolate is made. The cacao pods are opened up on the forest floor at these small farms that grow cacao, and the beans are removed from the pod and then spread out on the floor of the forest to ferment. And that develops some of the flavors. And then they dry those beans and go into then roasting process. And then, of course, all the processing that goes into creating the cocoa nibs and extracting the cocoa butter to then recreate chocolate. We're starting with a different starting material because our cells are not analogous to the cocoa bean that's extracted from the pod and then, fermented and roasted. So we have to take a food science approach and really think about how can we ferment our cocoa powder as well as roast it to get to those flavors. And the nice thing is that we can do that. And in that process, we degrade some of the flavanols so that astringent taste is decreased and you can bring out some of the chocolate flavors. Let me say, too, that developing a great tasting chocolate isn't our primary goal right now, but it will be in the future. And that's where we're getting to the commodity. And I'd like to say that right now what we're doing is pushing forward to scaling and commercializing, getting onto the market in 2026 with our high flavanol cocoa. Once we get there, then we'll have more time and bandwidth to actually start building the processes that we can pull levers to improve the sensory attributes of the cocoa powder to create really fantastic chocolate. And then you can start thinking about, once you understand the biology of those sensory attributes in the cell culture process, You can start building up different varietals of tastes and flavors in your chocolate. And that's really the exciting biology that I'm looking forward to in the near future. And I think that's going to require, based on what we know about plant cell culture, media optimization, as well as improving the bioreactors.
What are the technologies you need to produce such a high quality cacao product? Because you have the cell culture and then you have the whole sensory area, which is highly complex. What do you need and what kind of equipment do you need to use to make sure you get this high quality product?
So that's where I like to think of, for cellular agriculture to be successful, we need to change people's minds about it, not just overcome the technical challenges. And this is where I think that we can take these simpler processes like coffee or cacao cell culture to help explain the processes to people. And that will create more consumer demand and actually pulling the products from us. With plant cell culture, we don't do a lot of process analytical techniques. So we only control DO. There's no pH control. There's no temperature control. So what we really need is essentially macronutrient profiling at the end, flavanol concentrations at the end, and that's essentially it. Anything else related to safety, microbial, things like that. While we're talking about safety, maybe I should have interjected earlier too that many people know that there's a heavy metal concern with most chocolates. Consumer Reports came out with a report that essentially said that a third of chocolate products contain heavy metals that are above safe limits. And the nice thing about our cocoa powder is that because we can control all the raw materials, we can get essentially products that have zero heavy metals in them. And that is a huge step forward for when we're thinking about safety of products and safety of food and trying to convince consumers to try these things because not only are they nutritious and healthy, but they're safer than conventional products.
This leads me to the greater picture because when we talk about cultivated meat or coffee, lab-grown coffee or chocolates, we hear a lot about climate change, the deforestation, the environmental challenges. And you and other companies are trying to solve this or at least alleviate the problem. How realistic is it to finally, maybe in 5-10 years, to get to a spot where we can produce enough in labs to reduce this burden, or is this not realistic at all?
No, I think this has to be the future. Our future food systems have to incorporate new technology. Because our population is growing, we're going to be 9 to 10 billion people on this globe relatively soon. And there are projections that we need to produce 60% more food than we're producing today by 2050. And to support that population. So what I like to say is that we need to continue with our conventional farming and agriculture and supplement and add to it new technology like what we're doing with plant cell culture and cellular agriculture because there's got to be multiple shots on goal to be able to feed our population. The alternative is malnutrition and starvation. To me, that's unacceptable. So I am very much motivated by using my cell culture background and everything that I've learned in biopharma and at Upside to really kind of push the envelope on this to make sure that we're going to help human health, food security, and sustainability with the food that we eat in the future, rather than continue assuming that conventional industrialized farming and agriculture is going to solve all our issues, because what that does is honestly distracts from the negative aspects of conventional agriculture.
And if we keep this lens of the future, if we zoom out beyond the coffee and the cacao, what other lab-grown products do you see emerging and are hot and technologies that are coming into this space?
I think a lot of supplements as well as in other food products. So, for example, one of my colleagues has just started a saffron company with plant cell culture. So saffron is hugely expensive, difficult to make. And if we can produce it in cell culture, then really reduces a lot of the demand on the industry and also produces a higher quality product in the end. The other things that are interesting is ginseng, echinacea, and there's even a company that's a startup that's trying to make cell culture wood. And that one just blows my mind. That must be a premium.
Wow. Wood must be very complex to make.
I would absolutely think.
Especially, I mean, I just imagine how you would produce that. You probably would produce some cells in a bioreactor, and then you would need to assemble that to get your table at the end of the day.
Right. And so very much like cultured meat, I mean, I think wood probably has a lot of different components in there that you need to then recreate to create that structure. And that's where the complexity of meat is so much that I really think that we need to start with these simpler processes like cocoa, even wood, to build the foundation from which we can then really be successful with cultivated meat, or give cultivated meat the time to mature that technology.
If one of our listeners thinks, well, this is interesting, cellular agriculture is great, you're solving a big problem, what advice would you give them as they are transitioning over into this exciting field?
First and foremost, look for cell culture work outside of cultivated meat and biopharma. There are startups, there are companies that are using this technology, and start thinking about where those avenues are that you can get involved. If you are an entrepreneur, start looking for products that can be produced from plant cells, because I really do believe those have the fastest route to the market and probably going to be the most consumer accepted. And then the other thing to think about, and we talked about this back in 2023, coming with cell culture and biopharmaceutical backgrounds, you really do have a safety, efficacious mindset. All the products that we are producing, it's table stakes to be safe. So that's paramount. The next thing is efficacious. In drugs, we all understand what efficacious drug is, but in foodstuffs or other products, it really comes down to things that we as scientists and engineers don't think about a lot, such as texture, mouthfeel, aftertaste, packaging, and just all kinds of other things to think about that is really important to the consumer. And if you build it into your product intelligently, you can really kind of give yourself a lot of success.
Before we wrap up, Stephen, what burning question haven't I asked that you're eager to share with our biotech community?
What I would like to say, though, maybe you haven't talked about the collaborative part of this. Let me back up and say what I haven't heard questioned yet is, what's a team look like that is going to make this successful? And I'd like to say and call out my technical team here. They have done amazing work, not only with cocoa, but also coffee and cocoa butter. And this team has been able to, not only with such a small startup over a short period of time, develop a number of cell lines that are capable of producing good products, but we just brought in a person to help us also set up the data foundation. So that's another part that's near and dear to my heart, is to say that setting up as a startup, setting up your data foundation and making sure that you're capturing all of your data in a way that it can be used in the future is paramount, because so many pharmaceutical companies or large mature companies have data systems that are siloed and not interusable. And that leads to then the inability to use machine learning or AI, all of this other stuff. What I really want to do is call out the technical team for not only their technical achievements, but also the data and how we're building out that foundation to really kind of implement some of these advanced analytics that we're all talking about and that is really kind of consuming the world through AI.
What is the most important takeaway from all that we've discussed today, Stephen?
The most important takeaway is essentially that cellular agriculture is much more than cultivated meat, and we need to start thinking about these other processes using cellular or cell culture to produce products. And I really encourage all of your listeners to explore opportunities where you're doing some non-traditional things, and don't be afraid, because you'll find that cells and these technologies, we need to evolve them, and they can be evolved to suit our purposes as we develop new products. And so I'm really thinking about pressure testing your systems and your assumptions about cells and what they're capable of doing, because I've always been surprised throughout my 20 plus years working in cell culture of how far you can push a cell, and it's amazing what they can do. So I encourage people to continue pushing and look for additional opportunities to help food security, human health, and sustainability.
This has been great, Stephen. Thank you so much for helping us push or expand our horizon beyond the traditional cell culture. It's exciting what's going on in that space. Where can people get a hold of you and also taste potentially this high flavanol product or the coffee? Where can people do that?
So certainly reach out through LinkedIn, and we're hoping to be selling our product by the middle to late part of next year. However, we're a B2B company, so we're going to be partnering with chocolatiers, and hopefully we'll be co-branding, but that's yet to be determined. And so I would say definitely look for us at the end of 2026 or early 2027 in some of your chocolate products.
Fantastic. I am also looking forward to that.
As a Swiss, I'm sure you are.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Stephen, for these great insights, for expanding our vision, our horizon, and thank you for being on the show today.
Well, David, I really appreciate what you do here at this podcast. And it's all about scientific communication and bringing people along with what we're doing, which is very exciting and impactful. So we just need more people to understand and get involved. So truly appreciate the opportunity and always good talking with you.
Stephen Lang has given us a compelling vision of cellular agriculture's potential to reshape food production while solving real sustainability challenges. The bioprocessing fundamentals we discussed today apply far beyond chocolate. They're principles you can use in your own CMC development work. If this conversation sparked new ideas, share it with a colleague and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in today and keep doing biotech the smart way. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.